It's like we're always looking for answers from someone, right? Like when things get complicated, we turn to the experts, the ones who've studied it all.
Yeah, historians, analysts, you name it. They've got those insights, those hot takes that everyone wants to hear.
But what about those living in it, though? Like actually experiencing the conflict firsthand, you know?
Yeah,
It's different, that human cost. That's where we're going in this deep dive.
straight to the source.
Exactly. We're looking at Nick Sasaki's piece, Tears of Healing, A Journey Beyond Conflict, from Imaginary Talks. And get this, he sets the whole thing in the afterlife,
An interesting choice.
to say the least. We've got this young Palestinian girl, an Israeli woman, even a Hamas follower, all having this dialogue. Oh, and Benjamin Netanyahu's there too.
Quite the gathering.
And to top it off, Gabriel the angel, makes an appearance as like a moderator.
That's Sasaki for you. He takes this really unexpected approach to get at what's bubbling beneath the surface of this conflict. By placing them in the afterlife, these figures become more than just political players.
Right, it's like their souls are laid bare, grappling with those choices they made, the losses they carried.
The weight of it all.
And it's heavy from the get-go. We meet this young Palestinian girl, and all she wants to talk about is playing with her toys, the life she had before violence took it away.
It's heartbreaking, the things she describes.
And even in this afterlife setting, those tears, they linger. Makes you think about how childhood trauma, it doesn't just vanish.
It leaves its mark.
Definitely. And it's a gut punch, no matter what you believe about the conflict itself. To hear a child robbed of those simple joys, it cuts through all the noise, the politics. It's a stark reminder of what's truly at stake.
Exactly. Sasaki's using her innocence as this mirror, reflecting the immensity of what's been lost. It makes you question, can any political goal ever really justify the loss of innocent life?
Such a heavy question.
It is, and it's one that continues to echo as we move through this piece, especially when Sasaki brings in the Hamas follower. They confess this deep regret for the violence they inflicted, even though, at the time, they were convinced it was for a greater cause.
So you're saying even those we might see as being on the wrong side of the conflict, they still wrestle with the consequences of their actions?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it pushes it even further with Netanyahu. Here you have someone who represents national leadership, those intricate, high-stakes decisions, and even he grapples with the unintended fallout from actions he thought were meant to protect.
So it's not just individual actions we're examining, but the ripple effects of leadership, how those choices impact lives on this massive scale.
Precisely. And this is where it might get uncomfortable for some, because Sasaki challenges us to move beyond black and white thinking. He isn't saying violence is okay, but he's forcing us to confront the gray areas, the regrets that haunt people on all sides.
I can see that.
It's by understanding those regrets, the reasons behind them, that we can start to unravel these deeply ingrained cycles of violence, recognizing that humanity and everyone involved, even those whose actions we might condemn.
It's that deep listening thing you mentioned, right? The kind that makes you step outside your own bubble, to really hear what the other side is saying, even when you disagree, maybe especially then.
Absolutely. And it's not easy.
Not at all, especially with conflicts that have been going on for generations, It's like, how do you even start to bridge that kind of divide?
Well, Sasaki acknowledges that. He brings us back to that young Palestinian girl we talked about, the one who just wanted to play. Remember her simple wish?
For everyone to be safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he uses that to connect it back to us, to the listeners. It's like he's saying, we may not be world leaders negotiating peace treaties and all that.
Thank goodness.
Right. But we all have our own spheres of influence, places where we can make a choice.
Hold on, spheres of influence, I like that, but break it down for me a bit.
It's like this. Within our families, our workplaces, even online, those circles we move in, our words have weight. And we can choose in those spaces to lead with understanding instead of judgment.
So it's like we're all peace builders in our own way, in our own little corners of the world.
In a sense, yes.
Okay, so that's a nice thought, but what about actually doing something? Like, what can we really do? And the article doesn't shy away from that, does it?
No, not at all. In fact, Sasaki gives us some concrete starting points. He talks about setting up dialogue platforms where people with different views can talk, in a structured way. And then there's collaborative projects where people from all sides work together towards a common goal.
I can see that working, getting people out of their usual headspace.
Exactly. And he also mentions cultural exchange programs, just breaking down those stereotypes, by getting to know someone different from you.
Okay, I like where this is going, but let's be real for a sec. I can already hear some listeners thinking, sure, those sound good on paper, But the world's a messy place. These conflicts are so deeply rooted.
Right, and that's the challenge, isn't it? And Sasaki doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Instead, he uses this incredible conversation, this imagined space, to light a spark. It's like he's saying, here's this platform for dialogue. What will you do with it?
I love that he leaves that question hanging. It makes you think.
It does. He's pushing us to acknowledge that these issues don't have simple solutions, quick fixes. But he's also saying that we can't just give up. We have to be willing to engage with the complexity, the messiness of it all, not get stuck searching for those easy answers that don't exist.
And one of those messy, complex things, especially with conflict, has to be forgiveness. It's such a loaded word.
Definitely. And it's interesting you bring that up because Sasaki doesn't treat forgiveness like it's this magical solution. Even his characters struggle with what it means, especially in the face of so much loss and pain.
Because it's not about just saying the words.
Okay.
It's about something much deeper.
It really is. It's easy to toss that word around, forgiveness, like it's some easy thing.
Yeah.
But Sasaki, he unpacks it so well. Like the Israeli woman in the dialogue, she talks about how holding on to anger, it just keeps her stuck in the past, you know?
It's like it chains you to that pain.
Exactly. And then there's the Hamas follower. He has this realization that true forgiveness, it starts with really owning what you did, that remorse, that commitment to change.
Not just saying, I forgive you, and sweeping it under the rug. It's about acknowledging the harm, taking responsibility, and then actually making an effort to create something different.
Yeah, it takes guts, especially in situations with so much power imbalance. To be vulnerable like that, to really confront your own biases, to try and see things from the other side's perspective.
It's like that saying, walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier said than done, right? To actually step outside your own story, your assumptions.
Absolutely.
So back to this piece, I'm wondering, do you think these conversations, even though they're fictional, even with someone like Netanyahu, can they really help us make sense of these real-world issues?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if there's a simple answer, but here's what gets me. By putting these conversations in this fictional space, this afterlife setting, Sasaki creates this level of honesty that we rarely see in the real world. It's like death becomes the great equalizer.
No more posturing, just raw truth.
Exactly. Those stakes of being right are gone, you know? And maybe that's why this piece resonates so strongly. It's not just about this one conflict. It's about what it means to be human. That capacity we all have for such deep compassion, but also for such destruction.
It's a lot to hold, that duality.
It is. But that's what we're tasked with, isn't it? If we want real peace, we have to hold those two things at once. Condemn the violence, but also understand what fuels it. Grieve for those who've been hurt, but also recognize the humanity of those who caused the harm.
Finding that balance, it's messy, and it takes constant effort.
And it starts with each of us, choosing empathy over judgment, understanding over assumptions, choosing dialogue instead of silence. It's those little things, you know, those everyday interactions where we can make a difference.
So it's not about some grand gesture. It's about those consistent choices we make, the ones that build a more compassionate world.
Exactly. Even amidst all that conflict, our choices matter. They have this ripple effect, you know.
I love that. And for our listeners who are now hooked on Nick Sasaki's work, I highly recommend checking out the full piece, Tears of Healing, A Journey Beyond Conflict. It's on the Imaginary Talks website.
It's a powerful read. Might even spark some deep conversations of your own.
Because it's those conversations, those acts of empathy, that's where things really start to change, right?
Absolutely. They remind us that even in the darkest times, there's always that capacity for healing, for connection. We just have to choose it.